Hello and welcome to the Teenage Retrospect, a podcast where we look at the minds of aspiring young individuals and learn how to live happier, healthier lives. Today, I have the pleasure of introducing Alwin Paul, a successful medical applicant in Year 13 who has received an offer to study medicine at Imperial. So, Alwin, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah. So thanks for the introduction, Danny. And yeah, as you mentioned, I am currently an offer holder to study at Imperial College Medicine this October. So if I meet the requisites of grades, I will be moving to London come October time from a rural, isolated island of Enniskillen in Northern Ireland, if you can't tell by the accent. So yeah, that's a little bit about me, and I'm really excited to share what kind of value that I have from my experience and hopefully use it as a platform to help the prospective medical applicants out there.
Perfect. Sounds good. Actually, mentioning Northern Ireland, just generally, a lot of people who want to go into medicine, some of them come from more rural backgrounds, as you said, and they feel like they don't have the right resources or support to get into medicine. So, to those people who go to schools which are maybe comprehensive and don't have as much support, what advice would you give to them?
Yeah, and that's a great question, and it's a very relevant question as well. And I think the best sort of advice I can give to them is the idea of firstly accepting. I know you mentioned this concept in an earlier podcast, but the idea of an unfair advantage. Being in a rural town is obviously an unfair disadvantage against you, and you will be competing against those with more resources, more exposure. But it's just one of those aspects, and you can't really let it get to you. What you should do is instead leverage what you actually have. For example, it's a hugely digital age right now, so even just sending a simple email can get you experiences that you couldn't have got, years ago. So again, main thing I would say is don't let your location or your postcode dictate how difficult it is for you to get into medicine, but instead leverage what you do have. You have a great support system in school, your teachers, your careers teachers, and use those connections and people as avenues into to get those certain experiences.
Great.
Yeah.
Really nice answer. So, obviously, with medicine, I think it's absolutely obligatory that you have to do work experience, or like it's really, really recommended. Obviously, because of COVID, it was a bit here and there, but it's pretty much just generally known that you have to get work experience. So, from your own experiences, when you were trying to look for work experience when applying for medicine, what sort of routes and avenues did you take to try and secure that work experience?
Yeah, it's a very interesting question, and it's funny you mentioned it actually because I was one of those unfortunate COVID students who couldn't get placements in NHS hospitals. So it was really, really difficult for me. I had to brainstorm ideas. Okay, people in England probably will get NHS placements, but here's me in Northern Ireland. I have one hospital that's close to me. What else can I do? So then I thought for a bit, and then, like I said before, I leveraged connections. I just used this concept of mail merging, emailed pretty much every consultant in the area and just said, this is me, this is what I want to do. Can you help me get some work experience? And I actually got a good number of replies saying, yeah, well, I work part time at a private hospital and this isn't too hard to set up, so we can get you connected. And so through that, I got accepted into a 5-day placement at Kingsbridge Private Hospital, which is in Belfast, probably the only place in Northern Ireland that people will actually know. So I got a 5-day placement there. I stayed with my brother because he's a student up there. So it was convenient in that sense. And every time that I've spoken to people locally, I've always just said, because the NHS hospitals still aren't taking students here, I've always just said, send emails to consultants and see what kind of outcomes and experiences that they can offer you. So yeah, it was difficult for me, but it was still manageable. It wasn't like that experience was just cut off.
I think you mentioned like an incredible point about connections and how it helped you. So how did you go about like finding these connections? Were they more like local places, or did you go online and type up connections to find?
Yeah, I fully understand that both of you are fully aware of the importance of connections. For example, Danny, you're hugely connected on TikTok, and Mahmudur, your LinkedIn connections is just fantastic. But for me, it was more so about looking online. I used a tool called Bupa Finder, whereby I could actually look up local consultants, and just by searching their name or through that search tool itself, I could get their email address. and then I would just chuck those all into a spreadsheet and just mail merge the same email out to every single one of them. But it allowed me to change the variables so it looked slightly personalized. So that was the kind of nifty, slightly more efficient way that I expanded my connections. I started reaching out. I got my foot in the door. So yeah, it was a great question that you asked, and I hope that answers the question. So yeah, I hope that answers that question.
Cool. Sounds
Okay,
good.
so from year 10 to year 12, which is when you actually start applying for universities, where in like that time period did you actually start actively looking for work experience, or when would you recommend it?
Yeah, that's a good question. And firstly, it's probably important to preface that there is no set framework to do the work experience at a particular designated time. You can do it whenever, but in terms of the ideal pinpointed date or year to do it, you have to strike a balance between not being too early, because the earlier it is, the longer the time frame between the experience and your interview, personal statement, etc. But it also can't be too late, because otherwise it would just be too hectic. So you have to kind of find a balance. But it doesn't really matter when you do it, just as long as you're able to reflect on the experience that you've had. And I mean, really reflect on what you've seen, what you've done, because otherwise it will just be a faded memory. And that allows you to be more authentic, more open when you go to those interview stages, and the work experience is used as a basis of discussion, and that will facilitate the conversation between yourself and the interviewer. But if just to answer your question, because I kind of digressed a little bit there, I would recommend, again, like I said, it doesn't matter when you do it, but I would recommend doing it probably towards the end of year 11.
Cool. Yeah. Sounds good. Just generally in year 10 and 11, I mean, a lot of people have a lot of free time, like the year 10 to 11 summer, and the same thing with the year 11 to 12, even bigger with 11 to 12. We have a lot of free time. So in terms of actual medical applications itself, or even just A-levels, what would some advice be that you'd give to students who are in that current phase and maybe want to go into medicine?
Firstly, enjoy your summer. That's an important thing, because the summer of year 12 is when it gets hectic. When you have the admissions exams, when you have the personal statement, that's when it gets hectic. But in terms of year 10 and 11, enjoy your summer. Have a little bit of fun, but again, do a little bit of work. And in terms of what type of work to do, to go into medicine, you have to find your why. You can't just go into medicine for the wrong reasons. You have to know authentically, why do you want to pursue this degree that's pretty much going to consume your life. It's going to consume your emotional occupancy. It's going to take so much of your brain power to complete a 5 to 6 year course. So you really need to have a strong why, and you need to find your why. Once you've done that, then you can go about finding the experiences, the exposure to medicine, to solidify, is this really what I want to pursue? And in terms of how to do it, you could start small. You could do wider reading, read around it, read a few experiences, read a few blogs, watch a few videos. You could then be a little more detailed, a bit more active, do a few essay competitions, which is something that I did during lockdown. I did a huge number of them, and there's any amount of them on the internet. Do a few of those, get a little bit of research under your belt, and if you really, really want to explore the research side of medicine, you can actually do certain things like research projects. You can work on reading research product articles. You can email professors or consultants or researchers, try to see if there's any projects that they can offer you. So yeah, that's kind of how to spend your time during summer, because obviously, as I'm sure you guys know, when school starts, it's mainly academia focused, and there's not that much time to actually pursue your university choice or the degree that you want to do.
Yeah, definitely. One thing that I was going to mention actually is that a lot of people for medicine, they end up trying to make themselves be the perfect, well-rounded person, right? So they go into sports teams, they learn the violin to like grade 8 or something crazy. I think those are known as extracurriculars, right? And I think this is quite a sharp line between extracurriculars and super-curriculars that people just really haven't been taught about. So to people who do stuff like that, what would you want to say to them?
I think it's a great experience nonetheless, because I'll be real, I've been playing the guitar for like 2 years and I'm below intermediate. I'm not great whatsoever. So I think it's really cool that someone can play an instrument at a really high level or play a sport at a really high level. So if they really find intrinsic enjoyment in doing that, then continue doing it. That's perfectly fine. And there are some additional benefits to that as well. But in terms of if they're doing it for the extrinsic motivation that they'll get something out of it, i.e., help them in their path to medicine, then I would not advise it as much, because realistically, what admissions officers are looking at is your suitability to medicine, right? Everyone really knows that. So what they really care about is your exposure to medicine, your experience of it, your reflection about what you've done, and using that, they assess, okay, how suitable is this candidate for medicine? Those extracurriculars that you were mentioning, they probably make up less than 5% of my personal statement. They made up 0% of my interviews, so that nobody asked anything about them. Well, maybe one question was asked, but genuinely, it was just an icebreaker. So pay very little importance to those. They're really nice things to do. I'm not going to deprecate that. They're amazing if you can play an instrument really well. But as you correctly said, super-curriculars are what the interviewers are really, really interested in, or what admissions officers are really, really interested in your personal statement. And I know, Danny, you're going to pursue computer science, and Mahmudur, you're going to do physics. I'm sure for you guys as well that it's going to be the same concept, whereby if you end up choosing universities where they interview you, the basis of your interviews is going to be highly academic, focused on your supercurriculars. So it applies across the board, and for medicine, it's no different. So yeah, I hope that answers that question.
Yeah, good answer. Go for it, Mahmudur.
Yeah, so Alwin, speaking of like supercurriculars and writing, I see on your LinkedIn that you've written something for a professor. You co-authored a paper. Could you tell us more about that and how you got that opportunity? Because that's really sick.
Yeah, I mean, I was super privileged to even have an opportunity like that. And before I even talk about the opportunity, I want to talk about the idea of sort of luck. And it comes back to this book that I read. And this book stated that there are 4 types of luck, right? First one is blind luck. For example, you win the lottery. The second one is being so good at something that luck comes to you. So if you're the number 1 coder, luck is going to come to you. The third one is doing so many things that naturally you increase your surface area for luck. And I'll come back to that one. And the fourth one is being able to spot luck. So if you're into real estate, you see a good house, you're able to buy that appreciates in value, and then you sell it for a high price. But what allowed me to get that project is luck number 3. Again, this is a skill that I've used across so many domains, but what I essentially did was that at this point I had no work experience. So I was thinking, how can I improve my application to medicine? So then I stumbled upon the idea of research projects after doing a few essay competitions. And then I basically just went into certain university websites, went into their medical department, and I just emailed all of their top researchers. And in doing so, I sent over hundreds of emails, and a professor from UCL got back to me. And he said, my PhD student is writing this review paper on the HIV virus. She's really burdened with work and she would love some help. So naturally, a 17-year-old student who was dying for an opportunity like this instantly replied, said, I'm down, let's schedule a call. We got on a Teams call, had a few back and forths, and essentially, managed to write the paper, but it wasn't a simple process. As you can imagine, I was a 6th former whose knowledge of biology and of HIV was very, very basic. So it took a lot of wider reading, a lot of scrutinizing research articles to get the foundation that I needed to even be able to write the first word in co-writing this publication. So a few months went by, we wrote some stuff, we drafted some models, and essentially we got it published. And at 17 years old, I think, well, I'm definitely not the youngest, but I'm probably one of the youngest to have done that at that age. So yeah, it was a great experience for me, and I'm really privileged to have done it.
Yeah, it is absolutely incredible. Like, doing something like that is beyond what I ever could have imagined. Like seeing something like that on a personal statement would definitely blow someone away. But I guess going back to the whole timeline thing, so we talked about year 10 and 11 and some of the stuff you should be doing in that. But I guess one of the things that we should probably move on to is GCSEs and how much importance they have upon applying to medicine. Because I think one of the main questions that a lot of people have is they obviously have a choice between doing triple science or combined science. So they think, oh, if I do combined science, I can't get into medicine. So maybe you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so that is a relatively flawed statement in that in my school was a state grammar school, and I love my school, but really, because it's, let's say, in the middle of nowhere, there wasn't much resources or funding for that school. So the most it could offer was combined science. So I actually ended up doing combined science. And I don't feel like it disadvantaged me in any way. I think universities are fully understanding and fully aware that certain schools don't offer triple science. That was the case for me, and it did not impact my application in any sense. So to those students who are worried in terms of choosing double science or triple science, go for the one that you think will score the best. If triple science is an option, I would be inclined that if you're studying medicine, naturally you should be picking it. But if triple science isn't an option for you and you can't do it, don't stress too much. You don't need it. It's just a useful thing to have if your school does offer it, if that makes sense. Because if you're studying medicine, you want to explore the limitations of biology, of chemistry. So yeah, I hope that answers that question as well.
Yeah, that sounds about right. And in terms of grades themselves, like people say, oh, you need all 9s to get into like top universities for medicine. Do you want to talk about that too?
Yeah, I've heard that quite a lot too, and it isn't the case. You'll find that medic students or prospective medical applicants, they tend to flourish in school. They tend to be academically very, very competent. And you might have noticed that in your own schools. So like, if I just ask you guys the question, those that are applying to medicine in your guys' respective schools, do you find that they're very academically driven? Do you find that?
Oh, for sure, yeah. They're very, very motivated and they do very well in class.
Mahmudur, is that the same for you? Yeah.
Yeah, no. I was actually going to ask another question about medicine. So, medicine is one of those careers that, like, you know, if you study, you, like most people, will want to become a doctor or a surgeon or something, as opposed to like doing physics and going into like investment banking or something. So, when did you personally know that you wanted to study medicine and you wanted to become a doctor?
Yeah, so there's two questions out there. Like, I just wanted to finish Danny's one first, and I'll get on to yours, Mahmudur. So, in terms of the question about getting grade 9s, absolutely not the case. Universities tend to focus a lot more on predicted grades, so A-levels, rather than GCSEs. Oxford, I know they heavily look at GCSEs, but for the majority of universities, if you can show the level of competency required to meet the grades required to get into their university. So, for example, every university on their website has the grade requirements for that course. If you can show that your predicted grades match that or exceed that, then you should be fine. Your GCSEs shouldn't play a significant influence. So that's that one. And in terms of Mahmudur's question about when I decided, this is something that I always say. I'm 18 years old right now, and it's at 18 years old, being asked to make a choice that significantly impacts the trajectory of my life, it's a very difficult thing to do. So the reason I picked medicine, and this may sound quite contradictory, is that I feel like it is quite an umbrella degree. And it's also partially the reason why I chose Imperial. Because as you said, you do medicine, you study the 5-6 years, you pass the exams, but you don't necessarily have to go into practice. You can go into research, you can go into all the other occupations that a degree in medicine can give you. And I feel like that offers a sense of comfort, knowing that there isn't this rigidity around this path. There is a sense of leniency. So while certain people may not think that, I do truly believe that I don't necessarily have to become a doctor at the end of this. There are certain roles that I can get into, but right now I would like to practice medicine, and I think I figured that out when I was in the hospital during my work placement, because the sense of camaraderie between the multidisciplinary team, between the doctors, between the doctor and the patient, the way the doctor was such a conversationalist to put the patient at ease, it was just such an awe-inspiring thing to see. Like, I'll tell you a story. I was watching a surgery. It was a hip replacement surgery or something like that. And Bohemian Rhapsody was playing in the background. And the surgeon was casually singing along and drilling into the hip of this patient. And I was just like, damn. So that was just a side narrative to my work experience. But yeah, it was pretty cool to see, and it did really fortify my desire to pursue it.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really nice story. This also makes it seem like all the doctors that people think they all revise all day and just are very, very focused on what they do. I think the story pretty much embodies what a real doctor is. They just are good at what they do, and they could also enjoy. And I guess branching off the topic of having an umbrella degree and being able to do a lot of stuff, like making a decision at 18 like that is very, very tough. Your A-levels, in my opinion, are very important. They say subject matters. So being a 16-year-old picking A-levels, it's a tough decision. So to those who are taking medicine, what would you say about A-levels and what's important with them? What should you choose, etc.?
Yeah, so I'm aware that the title of this podcast is going to be something like a perfect medical application. And obviously, the word perfect is subjective. It's a bit of a blurry area, but I'm going to take the definition that a perfect application means that you can apply to any university and essentially have a reasonable chance of getting in, right? So in terms of meeting that criteria, you should pick biology and chemistry, because some universities require biology, some universities require biology and chemistry. So to stand a good chance for every university and keep all your doors open, I realize that there's not a door behind it, Mahmudur, this time, like in podcast one. But to keep all your doors open, oh, it's there, is it?
Is it there? Oh, wow. The people who are listening on Spotify are probably so confused.
Yeah. Oh, there we go.
Great reference.
You said the exact same thing last time, Danny. You said the exact same thing.
I'm a bit of a broken record.
There we go. Yeah, essentially to keep all your doors open, pick biology and chemistry, but the third subject does not matter. Pick something that interests you, pick something you'll get an A grade in minimum. Pick something that genuinely piques your curiosity. It doesn't really have to be a STEM-focused subject. I've seen people do English, art, history as their third subject and get offers for medicine. So yeah, it really doesn't matter.
And what about those people who say that maths is super important for medicine?
I would argue and say it depends. Maths can give you an advantage for admissions exams. So for example, the UCAT is really, really hot right now. So many people are doing it. It's peak testing period. And there is a maths section on it. Same applies to the BMAT, which is the other admissions test for other universities. There is a science and maths section on it. So yeah, if you're looking to pick A-levels, you may want to take a look at the types of questions that the UCAT and BMAT have. If you feel like studying the subject will give you an upper hand to getting a higher score for admissions tests, because they are really, really important, then, and you have a genuine interest in the subject and feel like you can get a good grade out of it, then that should be all the criteria for you to test before you pick your subject. So yeah, it's good that you brought that up, because the admissions tests are highly important, and I'm sure for computer science and for physics, you too as well will have admissions tests depending on which university you apply to.
Yeah, definitely, and they do seem pretty hard. Before moving on to admissions tests totally, I also wanted to ask, I don't know how familiar you are with the EPQ, but quite a lot of medicine students are starting to pick up on it, because it seems like a good opportunity, especially as a super-curricular. So if you do have any thoughts on EPQ, you can go ahead.
Yeah, so there's actually no such thing as an EPQ in Northern Ireland, to my knowledge, but I've done enough work with students abroad to kind of have an understanding as to what it is. Again, it's useful. It's a basis of discussion. It's something to put on a personal statement. But again, I'm just gonna say that if you, instead of doing an EPQ, you do what I did and you reach out to professors and you get a significant research project out of that, that shows more intuition than if you just follow the standard EPQ route. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I'm just saying it's something else for you to consider. But yeah, it is, you know, research is something that is so focal in medicine. Universities are starting to see just how important research is to their student body, just how important it is to advancing medicine as a career, as a to the procedures that are present in medicine. So I'm not gonna say don't do an EPQ. Do it if you have a area of research that you're super interested in, lies within medicine, and you can talk about it if it comes to it during an interview or in your personal statement. Yeah, that's essentially my 2 cents on the EPQ.
Yeah, no,
Sounds
like
good.
definitely. Like, so I'm doing maths, further maths, physics, and economics. So the amount I actually get to write, like according to my A-level subjects, is very little. So instead of doing the EPQ, I have this 5,000 word physics essay due at the start of year 13. I'm also, like you, I'm writing like 2 papers with a few professors from Oxford regarding physics, and I think that this skill of writing is so underappreciated because people who do like maths, further maths, physics, and then biochem, they get so stuck into like the whole memorizing thing that they forget or tend to overlook how important writing and research is in future for like for vocational purposes as well.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. That's a very, very good point because, as you said, people tend to get caught up with just memorizing stuff. I mean, essentially, GCSE, in my opinion, pretty much is just a memory test. So once you get to A levels and your subjects are so like limited, you often lose the ability to write fluently. So I'd say, yeah, definitely, as both of you have said, if you do get an opportunity, definitely capitalize upon it to try, if you can, writing like a research project or something of the sort. I guess now's probably a good time to fully move on to admissions tests, unless you want to
Before
say
you
something
move on, can I
about.
just say something really quick?
Yeah, sure.
Before you move on, can I just say something really quick? Yeah, I think Mahmudur made an amazing point there. Writing and being able to articulate your thoughts is such an important skill. And that is kind of in conjunction with speaking. Being able to show charisma, charm, articulating your thoughts in such a manner that the other person is so interested in what you're saying is such a skill, right? And that would really show during the interview because I know so many students, having worked with multiple medical students, I know so many students that are so black and white. If you give them a biology test, a chemistry test, a physics test, they will ace the exam. But when it comes to an interview, they stumble upon their words. They speak so fast. They don't know what to say. If it's the context of writing, they don't know what to write. What they write doesn't make a lot of sense. They get writer's block very frequently. So to pursue a career like medicine, you have to be multifaceted in your skills. You can't just be highly academic. You have to have the writing side. Personal statement is a prime example. You have to have the speaking side, the interview. So it's so all encompassing. So before you moved on to the admissions test, I kind of just wanted to make that point.
Yeah,
Yeah, no,
sure.
wait. May I quickly add, like, Alwin, I 100% agree with what you said about speaking. For example, there are so many smarter people than me in the UK. I didn't get all nines in my GCSEs, for example. I wasn't even predicted them, and I was still accepted into the Eton Orwell Award program. And I would say the main reason for that has to be the fact that I think I aced the 7 interviews I had to go through because, like you, I know so many people. I know so many people who who can ace a maths test, who can bang Olympiads like it's nothing. But when it comes to like real life, sitting with people, dinners, they'll get stuck on their words, or they won't be able to convey how smart they are. I don't think it's about how smart you actually are. If you want to impress people, if you want to get a job, or if you want to become friends with others, you need to be able to convey a good degree of smartness to the other person.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Just pretty
That's
much.
also why
Yeah, Jordan.
sorry, yeah, go on, Danny. You go on.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, it's all fine and well being intelligent, but it's what sort of intelligence you convey to people that I think is very, very important when it comes to interviews. So that's also something to consider.
Yeah, I was just gonna add, that's why I really commend you guys putting yourself out there. I know you have already done that so much, but starting a podcast like this, speaking to other people who are different, like-minded, but also unique in their own ways, who have done so many things, who have so many experiences under their belt. The fact that you guys can speak to all of them, be genuinely interested in what they're saying, and share that with an audience, it's just so commendable. So I respect anyone who, aside from studying, actually goes out of their way to develop and cultivate these other skills as well. And it will be crucial for medicine if you can speak well, if you can write well. Yeah, it's something for those listening to really, really consider.
Thank you very much. I do appreciate that. But yeah, I guess it's time to move on to the admissions test now. So from what I know, there's the BMAT and the UCAT. I don't know if there's another one, but those are the two that I know of. So the medicine applicant here, you could probably go and expand on those two.
Yeah, I mean, just for the UCAT and the BMAT, we could have two whole podcasts about them separately. There's so much to talk about. But trying to condense it down, they're two notorious exams. They're really not like anything conventional in terms of other exams that would have been done in school. So we'll talk with the UCAT first. The UCAT, it's like I mentioned before, it's peak time at the moment. It is testing period from end of June to end of September or thereabouts. In terms of the UCAT, for the medicine students who are listening, they probably know all about this, but there's 4 sections. There's verbal reasoning, reading large passages and answering a multiple choice question. There's decision making, which is the problem solving aspect. There's quantitative reasoning, which is the math side of it. There is abstract reasoning, which is patterns and the standard aptitude questions, especially 5 sections. There's situational judgment, which is where you're expected to put yourself in certain scenarios and pick the most appropriate responses. In terms of what I would recommend about the UCAT, or some advice to give, I've done 2 whole blogs on the UCAT, so I don't know if you guys want to put that in the description box or something.
Yeah, we'll be sure to.
Yeah, to elaborate, just to give a quick rundown of the UCAT. So every section tests a different skill, right? So for largely it's to do with time. If you were given as much time as you wanted on the UCAT, you would score close to 100% easily. But there's so many niche tips and tricks. For example, for decision making and quantitative reasoning, there's the UCAT calculator, which has so little functionality, so you have to learn to use it. You have to learn to guess. You have to learn to eliminate options and thus pick the one that remains. You have to learn to skim read for the verbal reasoning section, for the English section. You have to brush up on mental maths for the maths section. So for the UCAT, generally practice timing. There's an important, I wouldn't say quote, but there's an important idea, and it is consistency and quantity generally leads to quality. So if you do consistent revision daily and you do high quantity, you will naturally see an upwards curve of your scores. And that applies to the BMAT as well. So obviously it would take far too long to delve really, really deep into the UCAT. But if I had to give one piece of advice to encompass the UCAT, also the BMAT, but let's just use the UCAT for now, I would say do consistent revision and do a lot of revision. Practice many questions. For the medical students, applicants who will know what I'm talking about, do the equivalent of 1 mock per day, simulating the UCAT timings. So you train your brain to remain focused for the same period of time and for the same number of questions that will be required on exam day. So that's the UCAT. Do you guys want to say anything before I move on to the BMAT, or do you have any understanding of what I've
Yeah,
said, because I know you guys are in medicine.
definitely. Okay, one mock a day. How long is each exam?
It's 2 hours, so one mock is a minimum threshold, which I would require, which I would advise.
It's
How,
medicine
how
for a
did you
reason, man. It's so tough.
how did you do that every day? For how long could you keep that up for?
But realistically, because school
Yeah.
ends June and the testing period from July to September, it's really only about 7 weeks. So how long I spent was 7 weeks. In and about that, I had done some pre-reading before, but in terms of intense revision, probably about 7 weeks. Obviously, there's break days in between because it's summer. I'd be going on holidays, I'd go out with friends, family, etc. But the days where I had the time, I would do at least one mock a day for the first 3 weeks for the equivalent number of questions. And then for the last 4, I would do the equivalent of 2 mocks per day. But this is the important part here. Using the results of that 1 mock or 2 mocks, I would identify which sections were my weakest, and I would do 2 further sets of the weaker sections. And in terms of identifying where your weaknesses are, there's 2 things to look at. 1, obviously which questions you got wrong, but 2, because it's such a time pressured exam, see which questions you spent more than the allocated time for, or which questions you spent too much time for, and then think, okay, I spent far too much time here. What can I do to reduce the number of seconds that I would have spent for that question? For example, if it's a math section, to find 110%, did I divide by 100 and multiply by 110 instead of just multiplying by 1.1? Obviously, that's a very basic example, and not many people do that, but there is so many small things like that that can save those seconds, and those seconds add up.
Right, yeah. And another question that I wanted to ask. So obviously there's the UCAT and the VMAT. Firstly, is it only those two when you're applying for medicine? And secondly, which universities require which?
Yeah, so those are 2 great questions. The first one, are those the only 2? Those are the only 2 within the United Kingdom. Because I'm from Northern Ireland, I could have also had the option to sit what's called the HPAT, which is required for Irish universities, so the ones south of the border. But I didn't do that because I didn't really want to go down south. And what was that second question again?
The second question was which universities require which?
So obviously there is many medical schools in the UK. The large majority of them require the UCAT, and there is few, the STEM-focused ones, the research academia-focused ones, i.e. Oxford, Imperial, they require the BMAT. So in terms of which universities require which, I don't know the list off the top of my head. It's a simple Google search away, but there's also an important point to make here, and it's that the UCAT is done before you send away your UCAS options. So using your UCAT result, you can apply strategically to universities. So if you get a really high UCAT, you may not want to take the risk of doing the BMAT and apply it to 4 UCAT universities. But if your UCAT is really low, you may consider sitting the BMAT and scoring highly on the BMAT, so you apply to more BMAT universities. So that's just another bit of advice that's probably relevant to the medical applicants listening.
Okay, so these tests are evidently quite important, and did you use, like, personally, any books, textbooks, or any online resources that you can recommend to people who are applying for medicine?
Oh yeah, just to add before you go on, there's this thing called Medify that everyone talks about. So if you could also talk about that, that'd be great.
Yeah, so those are 2 great questions. I'm going to answer Mahmudur's firstly.
Sure.
In terms of resources, books, I'm going to put myself out there a little bit, and I'm going to say I pirated a lot of books. I hope I'm allowed to say that. I'm allowed to say that on this podcast.
Yeah,
but I've never been someone to spend money for tutoring or for additional resources for classes or anything like that. So I scavenged the internet for resources. I have a really comprehensive list, so if anyone who's listening is really interested, just you guys, you can put my socials down below, and I can share a Google Drive folder that I've created for medical students that is very comprehensive, covers every aspect of the medical application. You don't need to look any further for more resources because it's so stacked.
I'm clipping that, by the way.
on-
I'm clipping that and putting that on the TikTok.
No
Yeah, that
worries.
sounds great.
No worries.
That sounds great. I think we'll probably
don't
put it
blame
in.
you.
I think we'll probably put it in the YouTube description as well, because I think that's very,
Oh,
very
for
useful.
sure. Yeah. It's stacked with resources, cheat sheets, my own personal statement, anything you really need. So that's an important resource for medical students to look
That's
at.
why
And in
he's
terms
the
of
GOAT! GOAT! What a
respect. But yeah, in terms of answering your question, Danny, Medify is great in the sense that it has so many questions. It has like 15,000 questions, so you're never going to be exhausted for questions. There's other platforms like MedEntry, but really they all test the same thing. They're all the similar type of questions. So it's just about what I mentioned before, doing as many questions as you can consistently and tracking your progress, seeing where your weakness is. Medify is what a lot of people use. People tend to get great results from it, but because so many people use it, it's inevitable that some people will get good results from it. I can only imagine that other platforms have the same benefit, but largely it's just about exposure. There's many free resources. There's websites like Past Medicine, which is completely free, has a lot of free questions, a lot of free mocks. Medic Mind has a lot of free questions. The pirated books on my Google Drive has a lot of free questions. So essentially, it's not about the platform, it's just about familiarizing yourself with all the different types of questions that they can give you and being able to answer all of them in the time that you have.
Yeah, I think when revising for stuff like the PAT or the BEMA or the UCAT, people get quite frustrated and they start panicking. They go like, okay, I'm going to start revising. Then they go online and search things up. And they're given so many options that like they just end up being overwhelmed. It's called the paradox of choice. And like when given like 1,000 different questions, 1,000 different topics, I'm like, which one do I start first? So how would you start your UCAT revision? Did you start by looking over topics, or did you do a mock test first and then see your weak topics? Or what was your process like?
That's a great question. And the paradox of choice, it's completely true what you say, and I faced a similar dilemma at the start. But then what I realized is that it doesn't matter how I start, I just need to start. Do anything, do something.
Okay, so now moving on, I think it's probably good to talk about the personal statement itself. So we mentioned previously about super-curriculars and how important they are. So I think first it's probably good to define what a super-curricular is, and then we can probably talk about some examples of good super-curriculars and where to find super-curriculars that you can do.
Yeah, and that's a great question, and it's a great distinction to make. So I like to think of a personal statement as this proverbial showcase of everything you've done. And in terms of what a super-curricular is, it's an extracurricular directly related to the course you're applying to. So it's very relevant to put on this proverbial showcase. I'm going to plug myself here again, and I'm going to say that I've done a blog post on writing a medical personal statement, just a personal statement in general, put it in the description box. But essentially, super-curriculars are what should make up the framework of your personal statement. So in terms of how the anatomy of a personal statement, if you want to have a medical spin to this, the introduction should outline your interest in medicine. It should be fairly generic. You can have a little bit of personal here and there, but it should just talk about, have a very captivating opener as to what got you into medicine. And then every other paragraph, it should be like a fluid narrative where every paragraph kind of weaves in together and has all these elements connecting one another, and it flows. You can use connectives, and it's almost like this, you're taking the reader on a journey through your medical application, through your medical journey. And it's really fascinating once you finish it, you have this completed piece of everything you've done, because it's also really reflective. Because think about it, there's not many times where people sit down to reflect on what they've done. So sitting down to reflect on what you've done in your pursuit to medicine can also be a very fulfilling experience. In terms of the advice I would give to achieve that, I would say, I've mentioned this before, be very authentic about what you're writing. be very reflective of all the experiences that you've had, and be unique. Put the personal in personal statement. A lot of people start off with the general cliche, I've wanted to become a doctor ever since I was young, which really, really isn't the case. The case is when you were 6 years old, you were probably thinking about becoming the next James Bond or the next Superman or the next Batman. You weren't thinking of becoming a doctor, right? So just cut the crap. So that's the first point I have to make. The next one is essentially, I mentioned it before, start talking about your experiences, what you learned from them. And I mentioned to be unique with what you're saying, but don't be unique for the sake of being unique. Be unique for the sake of being truthful and authentic to yourself. Because admissions officers will catch you out if you start waffling. You have 4,000 characters, and I mentioned in my blog post to treat those 4,000 characters like currency. This applies across the board to every subject. Treat those 4,000 characters like currency, i.e. it's so valuable. So don't be wasting it waffling about certain things. Like, for example, I know in England you do the DOV, the Duke of Edinburgh. Don't be wasting those characters trying to bulk up your DOV award. Use those characters to elaborate on why you decided to do a research project on HIV, to why you decided to shadow an orthopedic consultant. That's the kind of stuff that you want to be elaborating on, because that's what the admissions officers want to hear. What are your guys' takes on the personal statement? Because I know you guys are on that journey right now. So I'm really, really curious to see both of your guys' takes on it as well.
Danny's not on journey. Yeah,
No, I'm on
he's
the
a
journey,
little boy.
bro. No, I'm not a little
Okay,
boy. Now,
anyways-
year 11
anyways.
summer, I'm thinking ahead, man. I'm thinking ahead with the super-curriculars. I'm going for it. I'm mainly doing, I'll probably go first because I have less to say. But in terms of super-curriculars, I'm pretty much just doing stuff I enjoy and just branding as a super-curricular. Because with computer science, I'm in a really lucky position that I can literally do stuff that I just find really interesting. So, for example, Flutter, I don't know if you guys know about it. It's a framework. I'm not going to bore you too much with the details, actually, because the medicine students probably don't really care. But basically, I'm learning how to make apps.
Neither do I.
I'm learning how to make apps. And that's a super-curricular, which is really cool. And I just enjoy making apps because if I can just think of an idea and immediately turn it into something, it just gives me like a superpower, basically. So my approach with super-curriculars is basically do stuff which are your hobbies. And if you could somehow spin it into a super-curricular, it'll be a lot harder for medicine. But if you can, then I'd just go for it, to be honest. But, yeah,
Okay, Danny, are you done?
Yes, man.
Okay,
I'm
cool.
done. Thanks for being so nice about it.
Personal statement. As Alwin spits bars and truthful bars as well, every single character treated like currency. You don't want to be talking. You don't want to be talking in a flowery way. You want to speak in basic English, listing everything you did and connecting everything together. There's no reason to add like long words or like any jargon, because the personal statement, you just want to talk about why you're interested, how you're interested, evidence that you're interested, and why you would be a good candidate. Nothing else. As for what I've done a lot. Obviously, as I said, I've got the 2 papers and the 5,000 word essay. I also wrote like a lot of blogs on Medium regarding physics. I was also reading this before the podcast episode. I think that's the only thing I have left to do, which is the wider reading. Otherwise, yeah, I have a lot of evidence supporting that I like physics. Which will push me forward, hopefully.
Yeah, what the nice kind of scenario that you want to be in, the situation that you want to be in, is where I'm going to bring back Mahmudur's point of the paradox of choice, where you've done so many things, you actually don't know what to put on your personal statement. And I'll be real, I faced a similar dilemma, and I'm sure, Danny, you'll have the same kind of situation. But you kind of want to, again, it comes back to the idea of not waffling and picking up your extracurriculars. It's just, you want to be doing so much and have so many wheels in motion that when it comes to writing your personal statement, you can actually ask yourself, okay, what experiences have been the most useful to me, and what can I speak about better, more truthfully, more authentically, more directly, if a question is asked about it. And if you ask yourself that question, you'll get the answer as to what you want on your personal statement. And again, that ties in with the whole idea of being authentic, and that's a word I've mentioned so many times now because I can't understate its importance.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just want to add a thing. If so, when we're all going to say you want to stand out and you want to be unique, but the thing is, you can't, actively try and be unique. If everyone tries to be unique, the new unique is the new normal, right? And I think the biggest thing you'll find in like people like me, Danny, and Alwin is the fact that we're not scared of getting rejected. As in, I'm writing 2 academic papers. Alwin already wrote one with a PhD. Guy. Imagine what we felt like as like 16, 17-year-olds writing an email to someone like 10 years older than us asking for a place. I think the way to think about it is that if you get in, it's a W. But if you get rejected, like it's likely that they probably reject everyone anyways. So you're not going to be remembered. It's not embarrassing. Don't be scared of getting rejected. Don't be scared of taking L's. The more L's you take, the higher the chance of finally getting a win, I'd say. That's what Alwin said about his third type of luck, which is doing so many things that you eventually become lucky. That's essentially what it is. Keep on trying, and you will eventually get something.
Yeah, I think that's a very, very good point, actually. I want to add to that. So, Editor Don, if you could put this up on the screen, there's basically an image of a guy he's got like a pickaxe on him, and he's mining, and he's given up on mining, and he was starting to walk away. But right behind him, there's a little bit of a wall. And then next to the wall, there are diamonds. Pretty much what I'm trying to say is that you've got to keep... I'm sorry for making this cringe, but you've got to stay persistent, basically. And one of the main things... sorry, I did it quite a convoluted way. But one of the main things I think people need to consider is that there's literally no disadvantage of going out and emailing someone asking for a research opportunity. Like if you email a Cambridge professor, they're going to say, oh, we've rejected you because of this. So there's literally no disadvantage of emailing people about it. It's not embarrassing at all. You miss 100% of the shots you don't take. Wayne Gretzky, Michael Scott.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, generally what I just wanted to say was that you should 100% just try anything, because there's no harm in trying. And if you do win, I don't know what it's called. It's called like Pascal's something. One of Pascal's things. I don't know.
Pascal's triangle, yeah.
Not Pascal's triangle. It's some like philosophical thing. But basically, the benefits of doing something versus the negatives of doing something. Because there is no negative, there's infinite positive of trying to do something. So there's an infinite positive benefit of emailing a professor and asking them to do something, because there's no disadvantage, basically. I've waffled a little bit, but that was pretty much what I wanted to say. If there isn't anything else on that thing, I guess we should probably move on to A-levels. And I'd just like
to quickly add, what you've said is again 100% true. I really like the analogy as well. Never heard of this Pascal's idea before. Quite useful, nice. But I actually asked one of the professors I did work with. So this is a professor from Oxford that I worked on a public awareness project for, and I genuinely asked him on a Zoom call, "What is it that made you reply to my email and offer me this opportunity?" And what he said might be quite useful to the audience listening. What he essentially said was that because I took the time to personalize my email, I showed an interest in his research. That's why he replied, because he gets loads of requests from students who want to work with him. They can range from A-level students to university students who want him to supervise their work or who want to do projects with him. But he said the reason he replied to mine and offered me the opportunity was because of my initiative to first email him, but then to also personalize the email. And I really hope he isn't listening here, because the email that I sent him was quite generic. There was a bit of personalization, which I was able to add because of the mail merge function. And again, I was able to add his name, blah, 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 whatever. So the mail merge function kind of saved me there. But it's just the idea of firstly showing the initiative to email him, but second, email him or whoever you're emailing. Secondly, taking the time to personalize it in some way. Doesn't have to be to a great degree, but just as long as you show some degree of interest in what they do, then they will hugely appreciate that. Because as humans, we are naturally wired to want to help other people. It's just an adaptation that we have. in biology. So there's even some sound facts behind that.
Clip it, chat. Clip it. That is a TikTok clip right there. TikTok clip right
definitely.
there.
Okay, I'm gonna embarrass myself real quick. So I was talking about L's and all of that stuff. The thing is, me and Danny and like a lot of people, a lot of the influencers that we follow, we always think that, oh, they're great, they're amazing, and they never really seem to take L's. And I always talk about taking L's. Here's an L I'd like to show everyone, and it's about a shot. It's about a shot I took, and I completely missed it. Backfired. So when I got into Eton, do you know what I did? I hand wrote a letter to Prince Harry. I hand wrote a letter to Prince Harry. It was either Prince Harry or Prince William, and I wrote a letter saying, I have the same laundry number as you, and I'm going into the same house as you. I'm really proud of this achievement. And do you know what happened? He read it. Okay, cool. But it wasn't him who replied. It was his secretary. And I got the letter, and here we go. Dear Mr. Rahman, the Duke of Cambridge has asked me to thank you for your letter of the 10th of July and regrets that he's unable to reply personally. It was kind of you to write as you did, and His Royal Highness was immensely touched by your generous words in support of his work and family. The Duke of Cambridge has asked me to send you his warmest thanks, along with his very best wishes for your future endeavours. Yours sincerely, Claudius Spence. There we go.
Wow. He comes up with the most random stuff. I never even knew about this. Just casually sending letters to princes.
Wow. There we go. Is the
what a guy.
What a guy for sure. I guess we could sort of... Yeah, that's just physically just showed you guys exactly what we were talking about. Just take every shot, because you could have the Prince of, I don't know, Duke of Cambridge replying to you if you take a big enough shot. That's a bit of a waffle, but you know what I mean. But yeah, I guess it's probably time to move on to A-levels. A-levels are integral when applying your predicted grades, your mock exams. So I guess we should talk about how you prepared for your A-levels. Biology mark schemes are all over the place. So I guess you should probably just talk about preparing for A-levels as well as the UCAT exams in Year 12.
Yeah, for sure. So it's probably a good time to say what A-levels that I actually did. And I did the very, very easy set. Pretty easy. Biology, chemistry, physics, maths. Simple anyway. No, I'm kidding. It was notoriously difficult. It was very hard. I didn't really need to do physics. It was kind of an added burden for me. But in terms of how I prepared for them, again, it was very difficult. It took a lot of hours. But I'm sure you guys do this as well. You probably did this for your GCSE exams. So before a lesson was covered, before it was taught, I did some pre-reading. Just went over the topic. So when the teacher went over it, I actually had any questions ready to ask. I was quite familiar with the content. So when it came to writing my notes, it was a fairly fluid process. I knew what I was talking about, and that was just solidifying what I had just taught myself. So that was step one. Understanding is step one, right? The next step is hugely proven technique of studying. You guys definitely know about it. It's the idea of active recall coupled with spaced repetition, right? I'm sure you talk about that on your channel all the time.
Anki, absolutely. I don't know if you're going to talk about Anki. Mate, I love it. Love it.
It doesn't really matter. It doesn't really, yeah. Anki, mind maps, flashcards, whatever you want to do, just as long as you actively recall the information that you've just learned and you strengthen those neurological fibers that are firing the impulses when you recall that information, and you do that repeatedly over a well-spaced period, then when it comes to the exam, or when it comes to exam time, crunch time, and you need to memorize everything, it becomes so much easier because you already have it learned. It's just a matter of rereading that information, recalling it. So that's the memorization aspect done. But for A-levels, memorization simply isn't enough. There's also the application of what you know, the application of learned concepts. And that part is practice papers, past papers. So in terms of how I would go about practicing for past papers, is that my exam board was CCEA. It's the Northern Irish one. It's probably, you guys probably do Edexcel or AQA. Which one do you guys do?
Depends on the subject.
Welsh one. I do educast.
Oh,
That's a bit random.
I'm guessing that's a bit random. Yeah.
To
Well,
be fair,
CCA is a bit random.
yeah, I think for my A-level computer science, I'm going to do the Welsh one as well. But for the rest of them, I'm
Oh,
doing
really?
like Edexcel or AQA, which is like normal.
Yeah.
I do OCR maths,
Yeah.
which is the most horrible thing ever.
Oof.
Unfortunate.
But yeah, I wouldn't. Well, I know a little bit about the other exam boards, and I'll tell you why. I got to the point where, so I was doing past papers for CCEA. Obviously, there's a finite number on the website. When I was doing the past papers, I was recording all my scores on an Excel spreadsheet. Not only was I doing that, but I was also recording the questions that I particularly struggled with. Did that for every single past paper that I did, and I did every single one on the website for every subject. For CCEA, I think that equated to something close to 200, but that isn't. I didn't do 200 exams start to finish. I skim read through the exams, and every time I saw a question that looked slightly challenging, I only did that question. So for some questions, particularly in maths, because that was very strong for me, I could skim through an entire paper and not have to do a single question because I was confident on every question that was asked. So I'd go through every paper, find out the questions that I find particularly difficult, note them down if I don't end up getting it right. I did that for every past paper question, put it on an Excel spreadsheet, and then this also applies to GCSE and A-level. Expand out into other exam boards because largely the topics are the same, the questions are going to be the same. There's not going to be too much of a discrepancy, but if there is, don't bother doing the question. But if you see a question that you feel like you can do, don't be afraid to do it. Using that knowledge, there's pretty much an unlimited number of questions out there for you to do. So in terms of applying what you've learned, there's an unlimited number of ways to apply knowledge. If you want to focus on particularly hard ones, go for that. But that is essentially how I would first understand the topic. That is secondly how I would memorize the topic or subject. And thirdly, that's how I would apply what I learned. And so that's the kind of like 3-step framework into exam success, A-level success, GCSE success, whatever you want to call it. And I hope I'm not baiting myself out here because now I really do have to do good at my A-levels. I'll know on August 18th.
Good luck for results day. Good luck. Yeah, I think that's a very
Thanks.
comprehensive overview of pretty much everything. So it's very nicely done. I guess one of the things I accidentally missed out was you applied to university in October of year 13. So I guess we should probably talk about one of the main things people ask actually is how much does your university matter when applying for medicine? So I think that's probably something that we could cover as well as like the different grades that you need to get into medicine at different universities, etc.
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's also a very important question because every university, every course that you go through for medicine, obviously medicine's a fairly standard degree, you do your 5 or 6 years, but every university is what's called GMC accredited. So no matter where you do your degree for medicine, you're still, if you follow the conventional route, you're still going to become a doctor, you're still going to practice, you're still going to work for the NHS. So using that as the only criteria, it doesn't matter where you go to university. What matters, and the reason I picked London out of my options, is because I feel like, yes, London is more expensive, but that is paid for by the connections and the opportunities that I will be exposed to when I'm there in the big city. Coming from a very rural town to the hustle and bustle of London, it's the best way for me to, let's say, metaphorically spread my wings and grow as a person. I hope that's not a too cringy way of putting it, but essentially, yeah, that's why I picked London. But to answer your question even more fully, yeah, like I said, if you're only going for the purpose of becoming a doctor, no, it doesn't really matter where you go. But if you're paying £9,000 a year, surely you'll want to go somewhere that appeals to you, whether that's for its location, whether that's for its prestige, whether that's for its resources. Pick where suits you, but also pick where you think you can get in. I hope that answers that one, Danny.
Yeah, that's a really good answer. I like the analogy of spreading your wings. That was really, really nice.
I mean, it's fairly standard.
Yeah. I guess university application. Oh, okay. Another question. Yeah. So some people if they feel like they can't get into medicine in the UK, they tend to branch out to different European countries. I think Bulgaria is one of the like main ones. So, do you have any opinions of that or any thoughts of that?
What is that? What's that say? I'm good. I appreciate Mahmudur. I appreciate it. Respect you, my
Go.
guy. Yeah, I mean, it's good to hear that what I'm saying is resonating with you guys. But yeah, Danny, to answer your question, there's obviously more than one route to medicine. It's not one clear-cut path. You can do anything you want. You can go to become a doctor if that's your end goal through any convoluted path you like. If you don't get the grades you need and you end up going to Bulgaria or Prague or wherever it does it, Netherlands I think does it as well. Sure, if that's something you've been wanting to do. For example, I know someone who's planning to go into Barcelona for medical school or something like that, somewhere Spanish. If that's something that's, for example, if Barcelona you like it for its place, its people, if its costs aren't too high, then why not? Right, it's just one of those things. If you don't get it first time, the gap year is always there. And I always say to people, if medicine wasn't such a long degree, I would have been inclined to take a gap year because that's my time to grow as a person, to mature. Again, like I said, I'm 18. I'm asked to make a life-changing decision. 1 year could add so much more life experience, so much more life case studies for me to get that extra exposure. I can change my decision if I need to, if I feel like I'm going the wrong way. But because it is 6 years, 5, 6 years, sometimes it is better to just go straight in. But yeah, it doesn't really make a difference how you do it, just as long as you feel confident and happy with what you're going to do. Yeah.
There we go. Cool. I think that's pretty much most of the things covered. So it could be time to move over to the Q&A thing, unless there's anything else you want to add. Yeah, there's been a ton of questions
I'm
submitted.
happy enough to move on.
Cool.
Yeah,
Sounds
fine.
good.
Medicine, it is hugely competitive.
Of course, yeah. I think it's I'm really thankful for you coming on, though. I do very much appreciate it because being able to
Oh, for sure, no problem.
get answers from someone like you who's been successful in the medicine application, which is so competitive, is just exceptional. So yeah, thank you again for coming on.
Oh, no
So
problem.
one of the questions I had was, you're obviously a head boy for your school. So would you say that position or similar prefectural positions have any benefit, whether it be for the application or just developing as a person yourself?
That's a great question, and it has its pros and cons, and I'll elaborate on that now. So the position itself offered me so many experiences that I wouldn't have got otherwise. It got me in touch with so many people. It again gave me the platform to organize so many things within the school community, become a respected, renowned member. It allowed me to interact with teachers, peers, pretty much everyone in the school community in a new light, in a new way. And I'm grateful that I was given that opportunity. Again, it taught me skills like leadership, public speaking, communication. So in that sense, it was amazing. Honestly, it's been one of my best experiences. But in terms of the not so good sides, in terms of the cons, there was this period, right? So in Northern Ireland, we do the prom. We call it the formal here. In December time is when I was organizing it. And because it was COVID, I had to reschedule, change location, change venue so many times. So 4 days, and I have to do everything. The school isn't affiliated with our school prom. So 4 days before my prom date, the date of the prom, COVID meant it couldn't go ahead. So essentially I had 4 days to reschedule from pretty much scratch. This is the catch here. 3 days later was my Edinburgh interview. And 2 days after that, I had all the school mocks that make up predicted grades, etc., etc. So I had 5 mocks, a medical school interview, and a prom to organize from pretty much scratch in the space of 5 days. And then here's another even more bummer. Events teams for, let's say, the prom, they're closed on the weekend, and the news about COVID came on a Friday. So I had Friday, Saturday, and Sunday to wait before I could even call an events team. But you think about it, I have literally 3 days to work with here. and I have all this stuff to do, and the
So much
prompts
pressure.
have so much to go into it. So being a head boy in that sense was a con. I did end up getting an offer from Edinburgh, so somehow I pulled it out of the bag, even though I
That's
flunked
why
it.
he's the
I kid
GOAT.
you not.
That's why he's the
I
GOAT.
kid you not. I thought I flunked that interview because I waffled quite a lot. My interviews picked up from there, but that's just one example as to why sometimes it can be disadvantageous. So I don't want to glorify the position, but it certainly taught me a lot.
Fair enough. Yeah, I think that's very, very comprehensive, and I think the amount of pressure you must have faced in such a situation really like epitomizes what the head boy position could be like. So, I mean, me myself, I'm pretty much considering going to head boy. Why not? But that slightly scared me. But I think
For sure.
the opportunity is quite unique. So, I'll probably go for it. Why not?
Danny, why, Danny?
What do you mean?
You already have so many labels. How are you going for head boy as well?
Mate, you
Bro,
got to catch them all. You got to catch them all.
leave some opportunity for others.
Genuinely though, I think with the head boy thing, I really
takes no breaks.
Of course, mate, no days off. But I think it's just a really, really good opportunity to like interact with teachers and stuff like that. Because I feel like, okay, this is sort of a separate thing. But I feel like in lessons, when people feel like they struggle with a subject, a lot of the time it's because they just don't have a good relationship with the teacher. So, for example, if you're taking English and you don't like the subject because you haven't really engaged with the teacher, but you haven't engaged with the teacher, that means that you don't like the subject. I could be waffling a bit here. But basically what I'm trying to say is your relationship with your teacher, in my opinion, pretty much determines not only how good you are at a subject, but how much you enjoy it. So if you develop a strong relationship with your teachers, then I feel like basically for every subject, you will prosper. So for example, with me, I used to be quite horrific at English, right? I was in Set 2 and I didn't really communicate with my teacher much, right? But I was very lucky
no,
to be...
Set 2.
Shut up, man.
Only
No,
Set 2.
shut up. No. I'm just using it as a... I don't know. I've forgotten what anecdote. There we go. But then I got moved up to Set 1, which was like, okay. But my teacher, because I had such a good relationship with my teacher, I'm not going to dox her or anything, but she genuinely transformed my grade. Like without her, I would not have done as well as I think I've done. So basically what I'm trying to say is the relationships that you have with your teachers is really, really important, just generally in school life. And there's no harm in having a good relationship with your teacher. And they also write your teacher references, which is also quite important for university. But I feel like being a head boy, that allows me to really develop the relationships with my teachers. And I think because I'm quite on good terms with most teachers, it'd be really just nice to continue to interact with them and get to know them as people instead of teachers. So that was like my 2 cents of that.
Quote by Daniyaal, Anawar, 2022. I moved up to Set 1, which was okay.
Shut up, man. Sets aren't deep. They're not deep at all. There's people in Set 2 who are destroying people in Set 1 of my school, but we won't talk about that. Setting systems, as long as you do relatively fine and you can do triple science or higher in every subject, then don't worry. Sets are waffle, pretty much.
Yeah, I just wanted to elaborate on what you were saying there, Danny. You get respect with your teachers, 100%, but you also get respect with the senior members of staff, with your peers. I'll come back to the senior members of staff point. Being a head boy, and I remember that you go to a state grammar, which was the same situation for me. I went to a state grammar.
Sorry. I go to a state
put in a position.
Comprehensive, non-selective. I just go to a normal one.
Oh,
Yeah, my school used to be
a state grammar. Okay,
yeah,
well, I went to
my school used to be a grammar ages ago, like
Okay.
time. But
Okay, so I went to a state grammar. In terms of how good it is, I mean, like I said, it's quite a rural college. We get about one Oxford student every few years. So, I mean, if that's the metric we're using, it's definitely not the best. But you're put in a position where you can actually identify and pinpoint the flaws of the school. And being a head boy gives you the platform to advocate, to solve those problems, to basically champion the student voice. This is going to sound like really, I don't want to say cringy, but yeah, you get the point. But to champion the student voice and also the teacher voice. And essentially, it feels good when you know you're making a change or you feel like you're contributing to something. So yeah, that's why I felt like the experience of head boy was quite nice.
I'll definitely have to consider it then. Although I'll probably have a lot of responsibilities, may as well just take every opportunity that comes.
100%.
Yeah. Another question that I wanted to ask was, I know you're from Northern Ireland, so that would probably be a lot less. But in terms of opportunities and like different experiences, like summer schools, stuff like that, were there any really good ones that maybe you went on or you'd recommend that really could basically change people's lives when applying to university, stuff like that, and have like a huge impact?
Bro, all the opportunities are in England. There's literally nothing here. If I had to say one thing, if I had to say one thing, it would be a very local project that was pretty much exclusive to my little town, which was I was 14 at the time when I did this, where they take a cohort of individuals from this small town, then fly them off to America, pair them up with another cohort of teenagers, and basically partake in a bunch of team building activities for an entire month. And it's really, really cheap as well. But honestly, that was one of my greatest experiences that helped sculpt my kind of character, I guess.
America?
So you were talking about
What?
experiences other than the
Quote by
ones. Yeah,
quote by Alwin Paul. There are no opportunities in Northern Ireland. In my little town, we went to
they're all
America.
in England, bro. Yeah. No, I understand that sounds like quite a contradictory statement, but it was a very local project, and I'm sure there's probably an abundance of them where you're from, where both you guys are from. But I was really lucky to have that one. I was really, really lucky to have that one. It was definitely one of my most life determining ones.
Fair enough. Yeah, it's a bit of a weird way for me to phrase it, but yeah, that makes sense. Okay, I'm going to get open my phone now because
Yeah.
we've had quite a lot of people asking some questions. Oh wow, there's a lot. Okay, so do you have to sacrifice many crucial hours of your social life when applying for medicine?
Oh, that sounds like such a doomsday type question. Sacrifice. You're gonna have to sacrifice some hours, but it's not as dramatic as that question sounds. To answer it, yes, but also no. If you prioritize your tasks well enough, if you are able to get work done effectively, if you're able to have some form of schedule to your day, it doesn't have to be a rigid one, you can easily construct this quote unquote perfect medical application without having to sacrifice any social aspect to your life. Obviously, if your social life means being out for 12 hours a day every day, then yes, you're going to have to sacrifice some of those hours. But it's not like you have to give up on everything. Like, for example, if you do sport, you can continue doing sport. If you do music as extra, you can continue doing that. You don't have to give any of that up.
Cool.
Yeah,
That's very good to hear.
definitely
Another
not to answer your
question.
question.
Okay. Another question I got from someone from my primary
Yeah,
school, which is crazy. They asked, how much
nice.
work experience did you do? Was it online or in real life? And any tips where to get that? So I think we've covered a bit of that question already. If you wanted to add anything, you can. But I think at the start of the podcast, we covered quite a bit of that.
Yeah, so just to cover all the points to do with work experience and the stuff that I did a lot of virtual work experience, but none of them made my personal statement. None of them made an interview discussion. I got experience in a private hospital, like I mentioned. I got my name published in a review paper. I worked on a public awareness project. I did this other article for a professor from Oxford. I worked in a care home in America as part of that project I mentioned before, and I worked with disabled children as a part of that project that I mentioned before. But other than that, I did a few essay competitions as well. But other than that, that's all I did in the build up to a medical application. So if there's any type of questions as to what I've done, I hope that answers everything.
Nice. Another question that I had, I think this is a really interesting question. This is from Tenkyu. I don't know if you know him, but he's asked,
Oh yeah, yeah.
what do you think of the current state of the NHS and why do you want to work in it? So I know you mentioned it's an umbrella term, so you might not really want to work in it. I think that's a really nice question.
That is a great question. And honestly, because I'm not at this management level of the NHS, I can't fully appreciate how difficult it is to streamline certain NHS processes or make it efficient. So I can't give a full detailed answer of that, but in terms of why I want to work there, I don't necessarily want to work for the NHS. I just want to practice as a doctor, and I'll tell you why. So why medicine is a huge question. You are inevitably going to get asked that, and you need to have an answer if you're pursuing medicine. And this is the answer that I give. And every time I said it, the interviewers smiled. They gave me a good remark. So just to say it on this podcast, this is what I said. I said, medicine isn't like any other profession where you are responsible to an employer, to a boss, to a conglomerate, to a corporation. You are responsible to the person sitting right next to you or right in front of you, and that's your patient, right?
That's cold.
And I feel like that's
Bars.
I feel like that is the purest form of responsibility that any vocation can give. That's simply all I had to say in terms of why medicine, because that is succinct, direct, to the point, and it conveyed my point.
You're gonna make me tear up at 10:30 p.m. on like some Monday afternoon, man. That's such a
I
nice
know,
answer.
emotional.
Genuinely, that's a really
Emotional.
nice answer, man. I
Danny,
really, really
it's a
like that.
Tuesday. Danny, it's
Tuesday.
a Tuesday. Not
Sorry,
Monday.
mate.
Jeez. That's how emotional he was.
Another question that someone asked is, how did you know you wanted to do medicine? So I think we've also kind of glanced over this already. But yeah, I guess just a little summary.
Yeah, we've touched that point as well. But just to reiterate, I kind of figured out how to do medicine. This is the cliche points. Again, I'm gonna digress here and give a little bit of a story.
Ever since a young
I set
age.
up a medical society in my school, and I put this question in front of all the students who joined the society. I asked all of them individually why you wanted to do medicine, and the answer that I always got was I really like science or I enjoy helping people, which are two of the most generic answers that every applicant is going to give, right? So in terms of why I liked medicine, yes, I like science, I enjoy helping people, but as I said, I have that exposure, that experience to medicine to see how much of an awesome profession that it can be, depending on what I'm doing. And like I said before, the idea of the pure responsibility that comes with the stethoscope and the green scrubs is quite appealing, quite attractive as well.
Yeah, I think that's a nice answer. Once again, quite a nice question, this one too. Someone's asked, what change do you want to bring to make medicine move forward?
That is a great question.
You've been put on the spot here.
I think the change that I'd want to make. But firstly, there's two types of change, right? There's local change that you can impact upon people's life, which a doctor does on a day-to-day basis. It's just a part of their job, right? Curing a disease that a person has or helping them cure it, you're essentially changing their life. So that's one change, the local type of change you have with your patient. But then there's also the widespread change. Using your profession as a platform, how can you create widespread change? And in terms of stuff I'd like to advocate for, again, it's a difficult question, so I'm going to have to think about that one for a few seconds.
Sure.
Okay, so the change that I would want to bring on a widespread scale is the concept that, firstly, understanding how much of a traumatic experience going to the hospital, getting a treatment for however severe your infection or disease or accident is, for everyone going to the hospital is a traumatic experience, right? That's set in stone. And the change that I would want to make is post-treatment. So I've done a few essay competitions, and I've read a few articles, I've read a few statistics, and I've noticed that if you can change the state that a person is during the course of their treatment, and especially after their treatment, their recovery, their functional recovery increases. So as in, if you make a person more happy, more optimistic, more relaxed, more comfortable during their time at the hospital and afterwards, their recovery period is proven to be shorter, quicker, and more effective. I actually saw this firsthand when I went to my work experience, because a nurse said to me, like, oh, this consultant, all his patients recover a lot quicker than other patients. And then when I started like exploring as to why, I noted, and again, I might be wrong because this is an observation, But I know that the consultant she was talking about was a very happy guy, very charismatic, and was able to convey that to his patients. Whereas some of the other consultants, they were quite stern. They weren't as charismatic. So maybe that was the reason as to why his patients recovered faster. Again, you guys probably do math, so you can understand that a sample of one is not representative at all. But I'm hoping that the studies and statistics that I've also read lay credence to that argument as well. So if I had to change something, it would be improving patients' hospital experience
Cool. That
across
was a
every
really
aspect, across every biopsychosocial aspect.
cool. Sounds good. That was a really nice answer once again. I'd love to have that guy as a doctor. Ooh,
I think everyone would.
yeah, for sure. I guess in terms of okay, yeah, this is slightly different. But we started to see with the whole Oxbridge thing that Oxbridge are tending to prefer state school pupils to private school pupils. So I might caught you a bit off guard with this question, considering this podcast is more towards medicine. But how do you feel about that? Because I feel like some pupils who are more from underprivileged backgrounds find it much harder to get work experience, and generally they struggle a lot more than compared to. Because I think with medicine, a lot of it is just connections that you have. Because if you're someone who's got like very high up parents, then it'll be so easy for you to get work experience, right? You'll have an abundance of it. But what would you say about that? Is it fair that it's making it harder for private school pupils to get into Oxbridge?
Yeah, and it's an important question. It's a relevant question. I know Mahmudur goes to Eton, so I would like to hear his perspective on it first, if that's okay.
Yeah, thank you. I can speak. Okay. Yeah, no, I mean, I'm in a very unique position to be from a disadvantaged background and an advantaged background simultaneously. I mean, Eton numbers are going down. It's unfortunate to some, but fortunate to others. I'm going to spit some bars. A man's poison can be another man's medicine. So whilst our numbers are going down, Brampton Manor numbers are going up. And if you want to think about it holistically, it definitely makes sense. I mean, they would do this. They would make such drastic changes to the application process with studies to back it, with evidence that they're doing the right thing, not just because they want to be liked by everyone else. And I think that I fully trust Oxbridge and other universities with what they're doing. For example, Imperial, I know this guy. Danny, you and I know this guy. So you know how the Imperial offer is usually what, A star AA. We know someone with an Imperial offer.
For me, it's A star and 2 A's.
Yeah, A star 2 A's. We know someone who has an offer from Imperial. He goes to a private school with 4 A star, with a straight 4 A star offer.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Damn.
He goes to Westminster School though, so that's the best school in the country.
Exactly.
4 A stars. I think it makes sense. The whole contextualizing thing does make sense. Yep. If you go to a better school, the offer should be harder.
It does. I mean, my grades have definitely jumped, and I can only, blame that on, not blame, like, give the reason to be Eton. I wouldn't have gotten as high grades, and from first-hand experience, I think, my offer should definitely be higher than someone from my old school because, I have more time in school. I literally live in school. I have way more resources. I potentially have better teachers. I agree with what Oxford are doing, and I know it might, end up bumming me over or whatever, but at the end of the day, it's fine.
Yeah, and I'm really happy to hear that perspective as well, because I think the position that you're in is, like you said, quite unique. And I can only elaborate on what you said, which is everyone has, we mentioned it before, as we mentioned on this podcast a few times, everyone has unfair advantages and disadvantages. So contextualizing offers, yes, you can consider that a disadvantage to the private school students, you can consider that an advantage to us state school students, but largely, if you forget all of that, all of the external factors, and just focus on what you need to do, then it doesn't really matter what you're going for. All that matters is that you know what you have to do, and you strive to accomplish that goal. So I'm gonna put myself out here, and I know this is going to be titled Perfect Medical Application, but I actually got rejected from Oxford. Again, Oxford University, huge, prestigious college, so many applicants. There was about 2,000 applicants. I made it to the interview stage, which even that is a huge achievement in itself. But as I said, going to a private school, the deck is stacked against me in terms of the resources that are available to me. But I have to make the cards play in my favor. So what I try to do is, like I said, I've tried to reach out to professors. I tried to get work experience. I tried to do everything that a private school student would also have. So yeah, again, it's just about seeing what opportunities are available to you and using those as your leverage to work in your favor. But yeah, that's my take on that situation as well.
That's a really nice take once again. I really like what you said. Pretty much trying to make yourself have the same things as a private school student, same opportunities or whatnot, and you're doing it yourself, which is incredible to see. To be honest, I think that's most of the stuff covered now. If Mahmudur has any other questions, then you can go ahead and do those now.
Let me check. Okay, yeah. Here's a question that we haven't asked. Okay, to put it straight, me, you, and Danny, we're all brown. What do you think personally of the whole stigma around grow up, be a doctor, get a good education, be a doctor, get money, and then all of that stuff?
Doctor, dentist, disappointment. That's the phrase.
Yeah.
I love the way you put it, and it is so true. It is so prevalent. And my parents, I'll bait myself out here again, my parents are like that. But I'd like to think that isn't what influenced me to pursue medicine, right? I did it of my own accord, and if I wanted to do something else, I would have the independence and the freedom to make that choice. And I'm sure my parents would support me for it. But in terms of what you said, if you go into medicine with the reason being that your parents forced you into it, you are automatically at a disadvantage, because no matter what you say, you won't show any interest, and that will be conveyed in an interview setting. They will be able to pick it up that you don't really want to do this, you haven't done much extra work for it, you don't really know what you're talking about. So there is that whole idea, but there's also, if you do manage to get a place and you do study medicine, you'll be unhappy at the end of it. So why bother, right? Why spend the 5-6 years of your life doing something because you were forced into it when you were 17, 18 years old? So yeah, that's a really interesting question, and I want to pass that on to you guys as well. So Danny, if you want to go first, and then Mahmudur, I'd like to hear his opinion as well.
Right, cool. So yeah, with that whole thing, I feel like generally with Asian parents, from my own perspective, because of the way they've been brought up, I mean, the majority of them are like second generation, third generation immigrants. Personally, both my parents were born in Bangladesh, and they both came to the UK when they were quite young. But basically, because of the way they've been brought up, they've sort of instilled within me a value for education. Like, I personally think education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world, right? That's Nelson Mandela right now. But I've pretty much been brought up knowing that education is very, very important, and that's sort of been ingrained within me. As a result of that, I've pretty much been pushed to have a high work ethic, which I'm totally fine with. But I feel like generally, because students tend to work hard, and Asian parents sort of want us to do the best that we possibly can, because they made sacrifices for us to be in this position. So they want that to have its benefit. They sort of encourage us to do whatever's the best of the best. Like, for example, I saw this like funny thing, right? There's this like perfect Asian child, and what happened with them is they go into Cambridge for medicine, because all the Asian parents, they hear Cambridge, they go, oh, wow, and they hear medicine, and they do the same exact reaction. But if you were to say someone got into, like, I don't know, the University of Bath, which is still a very good university, they got into Bath.
DMU, Nottingham Trent.
Okay, they got into Nottingham Trent for, like, English. Then, like, the child will be so hated. In some families, they will literally be hated. They will be despised. Some parents wouldn't even let them do that. I've gone on a bit of a tangent, but basically what I'm trying to say is the reason why I think Asian people or people from immigrant backgrounds tend to go into medicine is because it's sort of the guaranteed
No, you've just gone off
end goal
completely,
that
Danny.
most Asian parents tend to look towards.
Nobody can hear you.
most of the
Nobody can
time.
see you.
So I feel like because of that, children are pretty much encouraged to go into medicine because it seems like the safest way to please their parents.
Okay. Yeah, no, I mean, for me, so as for my personal experience, I've always been a rebellious kid. My parents did want like a child like Danny, someone with like high work ethic.
Oh, mate. That's so
someone
nice
who-
of you, mate.
Someone who can revise a lot, someone who can get good grades. But I personally, it was never my type of thing. I hated school. I hated working. I hated class. I hated lessons. The only reason I went to school was to mess about, to get into trouble, and then just get bummed by a thing. But I eventually, I eventually did somehow like end up getting good grades. So I had to like feud with my parents quite a lot. I'd be like, yeah, no, I'm not doing work. But I eventually did get the grades, and now I guess they trust me to do whatever. Like my mum did ask me early in the morning, like, what's the return on this podcast? And I was just like, I'm nothing. I'm just doing it for fun. And that was that. They trust me to do what I think is best for myself. Because, yeah, I do kind of freestyle my way through life. I didn't even want to do further maths for A-level. I was initially planning on doing maths, physics, chemistry, and German. And then I switched to econ and further maths. Physics wasn't my option in the long run. I genuinely couldn't care less. And I was just, the only reason I got into physics is because I've been watching like Vsauce and Veritasium from a very young age, and those are the only two people I can like ground myself to. And I was like, yeah, no, physics, it's always been in me. Might as well apply for it. Otherwise, no, I do a lot of things. Like I've been studying history quite a lot recently. I've been doing a lot of philosophy recently. I've also memorized all the flags of the world.
That's just weird, though. That's just like, why would you memorize all the flags of the world?
I was bored, okay?
Just pull up to a medicine interview, but like, do you know all the flags of the world? Don't think so. Give me the offer, mate. Okay, so I think it's probably time to end the podcast here. Thank you very, very much for tuning in. I'd like to give a big thank you to Alwin for coming on the podcast. He's been very, very insightful, in my opinion. Like some of the stuff he's provided, honestly, it could be game-changing for some people. And all of the resources that have been mentioned will be in the description, so you guys can definitely check that out. Alwin, any leaving remarks? I guess you might have to give a quote for us.
Yeah, so before I talk about any quotation, I just want to say, as Danny mentioned, my socials will be linked below. If you want to reach out, whole idea of serendipity, whole idea of increasing your surface area for luck, feel free to get me on any of my socials. I definitely will reply. But yeah, that's pretty much everything I have. All my resources will be down below. And yeah, in terms of a quote, because I feel like I've done a lot of the talking today, I'm going to throw an Uno reversal out there. I'm going to put it out to Mahmudur and Danny. So give me your best quote, guys.
Put the personal in personal statement.
Nice.
That's a nice one. But I think I'm going to have to one-up you here, mate.
Well, and get
You
one off
missed
the internet.
100%
of the shot
No.
that
You missed
don't take.
100% of the shots you don't take. Okay,
I've never
I
heard
think
that
that's
one
a
before.
banger quote. Yeah, I know. It's quite unique. It's actually made by me, and it was
Oh,
also made by
really?
some guy called Wayne Gretzky. But ignore him. He's just like he copied.
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
Who's
He's
the
right.
one with 100,000 followers? Who's the one?
Yeah, of course, mate. Wayne Gretzky, mid. But yeah, genuinely, I think it's a really, really good takeaway to have. As Alwin has clearly demonstrated, and what he pretty much embodies is, if you put yourself out there, you can very, very much have a big benefit, and you can really seize up some incredible opportunities. I think your story is very inspirational, to be honest. Coming from such a rural village in Northern Ireland, the big city of London, studying medicine, just because of it's pretty much all just down to you. Okay, so once again, I really like that quotation. Thank you very much for tuning in, and all the socials will be in the description, all linked in the description. I hope you've enjoyed the Teenage Retrospect. I've been Danny, he's been Mahmudur, he's been Alwin, and this has been the Perfect Medicine Application. See you soon. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.